Honest J. Nowak. Oh yeah. A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome to episode number 250. That's right, we've come a long way since the very first ever episode had been aired. 250 episodes. That's pretty amazing, as far as I know. It's more than 2/3 of a full year's worth of episodes that I would have aired altogether. But of course, I will stick with my one episode a day process. But right now, I'm kind of going on a little bit of a binge, uploading tons of episodes every day. Just think about it. These last few days, I have actually been uploading more than 10 episodes a day. At the same time that I'm already managing Gaming with Kaiju Force Neo and Honest Jaden Hoak, I also had Happy Landings, Nerf Secret Revealed, and even Hot Wheels Hilarity up and running. That's amazing. That's just solid workmanship for me. A lot of workmanship. And I should be proud of it all. So to celebrate every single step of the way that I've ever come across to making it this far, I'm going to talk about my all-time favorite game company, SEGA. SEGA. Not Sentient Electronic Global Annihilator, according to James Rolfe of AVGN/Cinemassacre Video. But anyways, SEGA, of course, has been my number one favorite game developer and publisher of all time. And that's only because Sonic the Hedgehog, of course, was one big thing about it. The blast processing campaign, as well as the Genesis does with Nintendo slogan, it all came down to it as one big deal. Sega and Nintendo, of course, were some of the biggest competitors in the console wars, but eventually others tried to step up, and some of which failed, while others started rising to the top. Some of the failures would include Panasonic's 3DO, Philips' Compact Disc Interactive, and much more throughout the early 90s. Atari would also continuously try to step in and continually attempt to grapple against Sega and Nintendo's shearing popularity with their Super NES and Sega Genesis, which of course were bound to come to a new generation, with the Saturn and the 64. But of course, Atari would just lose time and time again, with the 2600, 5200, 7800, and as soon as Sega and Nintendo would come along, other consoles, including the Lynx and then the Jaguar, as well as a cancelled Panther, would come into play. But Sega, of course, has had a special place in my life, being that it was one of the first ever game consoles I've ever played. Yes, I once did own a Model 2 Genesis with cartridges, but that was for an extremely short period of time, so it's a rare thing out there to have. Of course, within my own memory, I could simply remember it, and it hardly wouldn't really matter because eventually other Sega consoles started to flow in. Most importantly, the Saturn. We ended up getting ourselves a Saturn for me to play with, and that didn't really turn out so good either. So of course, we went ahead and stuck around with the help of Jakks Pacific. They were responsible for the majority of Sega-based game consoles being ported into their own, and they were made to be plugged into a television via an RCA input and played just like that. Ergo, their lineup of plug-and-play games, which were essentially based off of certain game consoles, all sorts. Nintendo consoles, Sega consoles, Atari consoles, and many more. Of course, my Sega Genesis copycat was made by Radica. Of course, the Sega Genesis console that they developed and made for us to play as a plug-and-play game had 6 different games in it. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Gain Ground, Columns, which is very similar to Tetris in a way, probably just a clone of it, as well as Echo the Dolphin, The Ooze, and Alex the Kid. Now, me personally, I've played all 6 of those games, but I've also managed to pick up a disc for Genesis Classics for the Xbox 360. But that wasn't until way later. And by then, my favorite Sega Genesis game of all time that I could pretty much put together with that Radica console was the Ooze. And as a matter of fact, I do have the introductory track with its basic 16-bit rendition composed by Howard Drosen as my ringtone for my Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge smartphone. Trust me or not on that. Every time you call me, that's exactly what you're going to hear. You're going to hear this same exact track that would play every time you'd start the game itself. The opening cutscene, pretty much, would take place. Which is just a combination of still images, pretty much, blended onto a television, but, hey, the game itself was amazing at the time that I played it, even though I never really got far on that whole game itself. Of course, I might try again, but you know what? Some of these modern televisions are not going to cooperate well with RCA inputs themselves, since some of them don't even have any. Well, I don't have many options there. But you know what? The memories are never going to fade away, especially because even to this day, I have played a lot of the Genesis games on that Genesis Classics Xbox 360 game, and it was amazing. I was able to play even more Genesis games than ever, compared to every other port that I've ever had Sega games built for. And yet, there are Nintendo consoles that have also had Sega games for them. Sonic the Hedgehog is still going to stick around to this very day, even beyond the Switch. But who knows what could happen then? Who knows if we're going to ever get a new Nintendo console? More on that in a future episode. But as of now, there's a lot about Sega that I would like to talk about, but since I've pretty much taken it on this far, I'm going to see where episodes 251 to 752 of this particular season will take me. But if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.